It is high time I got started on this kitchen counter. I know that there are many of you who have been anxiously waiting to see the final outcome of my kitchen. If you're new to my channel, I started this kitchen counter over a year ago. Remember that when you walked through this door behind me, you were greeted with this center island. And the center island really blocked your view when you walked in the door. It forced your eye to go one of two directions, either straight down this alleyway, which became a drop zone for everything, especially during the chaos and the clutter of construction during the summer months, or it forced your eye to go to the pantry wall, which wasn't very appealing to look at because your eye had no place to rest. And so with my son here, I had him rip out that center island, which I could have possibly done on my own, but believe it or not, that thing was overbuilt. It was so stout and so heavy, but my son being the brute, he was able to take out most of it in large chunks without even breaking it apart. Once all of the demolition work had been completed and my son had left, then it was up to me to build this kitchen counter. Now, for the most part, I used just construction grade lumber. I used some 2x12s and also some dimensional lumber, as well as these really beautiful and stout table legs to build this project out. However, as you can see, the project is needing a coat of stain as well as to be sealed, and that is what I'll be doing here momentarily. But I ran into some issues, hence why it's taken me so long to get back to it. Before I begin to talk about what the issues are that I ran into with this countertop, I'd actually like to take you on a little detour because at the end of this countertop, there will be a piece of stone that will sit here. This piece of stone is going to act as my drain board. And there was a little fiasco around picking up this stone. So head with me down to the Kenai Peninsula. We'll take you on just a quick detour and then we'll get right back into the kitchen counter and all the issues that I ran into. And I'll bring you along for the progress of getting this kitchen finished.
Place where we can go and be alone. So come away with me, nobody has to know where we gonna go. I was just calling to see if you're free to run away with me, to run away with me. Don't tell your friends, we'll let them know we're safe later on. The road's calling, sun on our skin, sleeping under stars when it's gone. I was just calling to see if you're free to run away with me, to run away with me, to run away with me.
I had ordered a custom piece of stone for the drain board for the countertop. And so Kenai and I had stayed in a cute little Airbnb down on the Kenai Peninsula, where we stayed for a day or two before heading down to Homer, where we were going to pick up the piece of stone. Yeah, I knew that. What do you think, Nick? You think we can fix a Harley now? Are we going to be able to fix a Harley? Maybe. Only we had one, huh? Only. All right, you want to go? You want to go? Let's go get a piece of stone. Should we go get a piece of stone? Let's go. Yep, we're going to go. All right, we're going on the road. All right, it's off to Homer we go. On our way down to Homer, we enjoyed some of the sights before I stopped in at the Duncan House Diner to grab myself some breakfast, where I enjoyed some Eggs Benedict, only then to realize that the stone was not actually going to be picked up in Homer, but in Soldotna, an hour north of here. So I headed back up to Soldotna, grabbed the stone, and headed home. So if you figured out by now that sometimes I'm a bit of an airhead and I don't pay attention to detail, sometimes. Had I paid attention to detail, I could have saved myself a few hundred miles of a trip. But nonetheless, I got a beautiful trip down to Homer out of the deal, and I did manage to get my stone. I will actually show you that stone when I get this whole countertop put together. So not only did I pick up that piece of stone, but over the course of time, I also picked up a piece of butcher block. And my son, when he was out here, was kind enough to trim that piece of butcher block down for me because it was a bit too wide for the countertop. As you can see by looking at the piece of butcher block, that it is protruding out in front of the piece of stone that I just mentioned by a few inches. So my son is taking a straight edge and marking a line that then we will come along with some painter's tape and place that on the inside of the line. The reason that we're doing this is by putting the painter's tape down and using a fine tooth circular saw blade, having about 60 teeth on it total, so more teeth per inch, it will prevent the wood from chipping or splintering as we make our cut here. But after he made this cut, the butcher block basically just sat on the counter for almost a year. I should have had it done a long time ago, but I'm so afraid of wasting money. I'm so afraid of making a mistake that's going to cost me money that I have just hesitated to get this kitchen done. But I cannot wait any longer because nothing's going to change. I've hesitated, researched long enough that if I just keep waiting, it'll do me no good. So today, I'm going to get started on just that. I'm going to get busy mixing up my stain, and then I'm going to talk to you about some of the issues that I've already run into, which is why it has taken me so long to get to this point. I've mentioned over the course of several videos previously that I ran into some issues with this countertop. And the very first one came with the way that I constructed it. And that was that I use dimensional lumber. I don't recommend that you use dimensional lumber, which you see right here, for any finished carpentry whatsoever. But again, I'm living in a rustic old cabin in Alaska, and I was going for a rustic look. So the butcher block is one of the things that I had to do to resolve the issue that I ran into with this dimensional lumber. If you can see this seam right here alongside of me, it's because dimensional lumber has a little bit of a lip to it. As I'm holding my knuckles together here, you can see there's a channel, and that is exactly what I have going on here, is this little channel that allows food and debris and everything else to fall into it, which is why I bought the butcher block. So that's the first issue that I ran into with this countertop, was I didn't choose the right kind of wood. The next issue that I ran into was with the said butcher block. After my son made that cut in the butcher block, it sat here on the counter for almost a year, like I said, outside of its original packaging. The butcher block must be sealed or finished on all surfaces within 2 to 4 hours of removing that shrink wrap. 2 to 4 hours. Not a year, 2 to 4 hours. Because I didn't do that, that meant that the wood began to cup. So the outer edges began to lift and it began to sink in the middle, basically forming a bowl shape. I didn't notice this until I put it onto my tabletop to begin staining it. I did flip it over. It kind of remedied itself. I did flip it over again, and I've not seen the cupping since. But that is something to be aware of if you are planning on using butcher block, is make sure you stain it and seal it within the first hours after taking it out of packaging. Again, don't do as I do. I'm hoping that it's not going to cup again before I can get it attached to the countertop itself. I have one more concern, and that is right here in my hand. And that is that I'm going to attempt to stain my counter, starting with this backsplash and seal here. But the issue that I have is that I don't have a whole lot of stain choices available to me here in Alaska. I have gel stain and I have some oil stain. Oil-based stain such as this here is a penetrating stain, meaning that it's going to seal up the pores of this wood. Well, I plan on sealing the finish with tung oil, and you can't really use a penetrating oil such as tung oil over a penetrating oil stain such as this. So I've mixed together some tung oil and my stain along with a little bit of orange solvent, and I'm going to see if I can attempt to get this resolved. Wish me luck, because I've never been more scared in my life than I am right now. Not really, but I am a bit concerned about how this is going to turn out. So here goes nothing. So the stain color that I have chosen, called Gunstock, and it's a bit orangey, a bit red, as you can see here. And I'll put a little bit on the front of the sill here so that you can see what that looks like. Originally, I thought I was going to use either Early American or Provincial to stain the countertop and the butcher block. However, when I tested them out, they were very brown. They made the wood look very dingy. That, of course, is not what I was going for. It looked pretty much like what was already here, and I just was not satisfied. So I did eventually choose the Gunstock because it has red undertones, as I just showed you, and so does the rest of the cabin. So it matched much better than the other two did. But I also tried using some DIY wood conditioners. You want to use a wood conditioner when staining because it's going to help to raise the grain and also fill in some of the pores so that when you apply your stain, you get a more even look or appearance to the stain finish. But I found on the pine, which the countertop itself is made out of, that it made no difference. I did eventually wind up using one of the DIY wood conditioners, which was, I believe, the diluted coffee version. I also tried a tea version. The coffee, or whichever one I used, did actually help on the butcher block, and that's the only place I used it. But as you can see here, I'm testing it out, what it looked like before the stain, with the coffee, no conditioner, and then with the tea. And here is the final results. Now, these were all done without the use of tung oil. This is just pure stain. What I did find is that when I put the tung oil
over the Minwax products, it basically removed all the stain, and you couldn't even tell that I had applied stain. It just was not working. But by mixing the Varathane penetrating oil stain in with the tung oil, I got a finish that I actually really liked. Again, I'm using the Varathane gunstock here with tung oil, and I'm using an orange solvent because tung oil is so thick that it takes forever to dry. And by using the solvent, it helps to thin it out a little bit and allows for better penetration. Overall, I think I'm very satisfied with this.
It does make a difference. Even though I'm using oil-based stains on top of a water-based DIY wood conditioner, I am seeing some pretty significant differences here. I still think for my needs that this color is what I'm going to go with, which is Gunstock by Varathane. And what I'm seeing here is that the coffee stain has less blotching. It still has a little bit. There's some right here and here. But the untreated piece, there's a lot of variations. It's showing a lot of the crowning of the grain here. And on this piece here that is the tea stained, there is still some blotching around these knots. There's definitely a lot darker areas, but the coffee stain looks best. Out of these other two colors, they're a little too brown for my desires at this moment, but I still think that the coffee, at least on this piece, I think looks better. The wood tone is a lot more even than it is here. You can definitely see a lot more of that grain popping through, which I don't necessarily want. And on this piece, there's a lot of blotching. It is not as dark on either of these, but I think the coffee is the winner for me here on the wood conditioner. Why am I telling you all this? Because there were a lot of you who said that you really liked what I'd done and that you were thinking about doing this yourself after seeing what I had done originally to build this countertop. Well, I'm telling you right now, don't do as I do because in the end, you might not be very happy with the product, or you run into some issues. So just be wise in what you're doing. Choose correctly, make good decisions, because I don't always do that. And then I have to live with the results. And in this case, that means I had to live with my decision to drag my feet and be very overly cautious for the past few months. Now that I have the stain actually on the sill, I'm happy with the decision that I've made in color. Well, this is the moment of truth. There's no turning back. Well, I guess I could not do this and just put it back on the countertop as is, but I know this butcher block won't last if I do that. So I already showed you how I was staining the seal and the backsplash, and now is the time to go ahead and stain the butcher block. Can you tell I'm a bit apprehensive to say the least? So in this jar here, I have equal portions of my stain color, tung oil, and orange solvent. And I'm just gonna begin to just stain this on, flooding my butcher block with this color. I'm gonna let it sit for an hour, and then I'm gonna come back and do a second coat. And then from there, I will begin sealing it with some tung oil. Oh, I hope this works. The way this looks on camera is nothing like it looks in person. In person, this is a lot more red than it shows on camera. On the screen of my iPhone, it looks very brown, but it does not in person. And this butcher block is soaking up this stain. Very thirsty board.
Between each coat of stain and tung oil, after it completely dried, I would go back in with 300 grit sandpaper, sand down a light finish on it, and then come back with a tack cloth to remove any dust particles that would be there before reapplying the stain. As I mentioned before, this was done for a total of 9 times to get the finished look.
I should have grabbed this. Hold on, hold on. Okay, now I got to do this stone piece. So this is really heavy. There's probably going to be a lot of cussing and swearing. So I'll be right back after this commercial break.
Well, hello, distinguished gentlemen. After all this time, the counter is finally done. And I don't know what you guys think, but I am in love with how it turned out. I was so nervous, as you probably guessed from the earlier parts of this video, about how it was going to look once it was all finished. But I could not be happier. I know a lot of times that I myself, and I believe others do as well, we stop ourselves from doing the things that we really want to do because we're intimidated by them or we're fearful of how things might turn out. But let this set an example for you that most often your fears are just that. They're just fears. And in the end, things will turn out okay. I know I was definitely afraid of how this would turn out, and that's why I dragged my feet on it for so long. But it really did turn out okay. It turned out really nice, in fact. I love the color. I couldn't be any happier than I am with having the butcher block on here and how it looks, because it looks really close to what I had in mind when I envisioned this whole endeavor to begin with. If you watched some of my previous videos, you might recall seeing the video where I talked about building this counter in the first place, and that this counter was going to be built in a way that resembles an old French provincial butcher's counter, and that is the look I was going for. It's not anywhere near exact to an antique original, mainly because I don't have, you know, a 3-inch thick or 5-inch thick butcher block on here. I have just your traditional butcher block that you can pick up at any big box hardware store. But I did put on some iron features, as you can see here, by these corner brackets. And then I put on these large rings here. These are actually door knockers. You know, let's see here. A true door knocker. But this will allow me to hang dish towels from here so I have a place to dry my hands after
I put my dishes here on this new stone, which is my drain board. I did say earlier on that I would give you a close-up of this. This is a piece of soapstone that I picked up in Soldotna, and I could not be happier with it. The one thing is though, is that if you're ordering stone like I did, make sure that they understand your request when you put it in. I had requested that all the corners be similar to this here as the edges, where it was 1/8 of an inch corner, but they misunderstood and went by my drawing and not by my notes, and they gave me a full rounded corner here. So I thought about matching that corner on the other end of the butcher block, but it's 8 feet apart from each other, and I don't think anybody will really notice but me. And even though it doesn't match corner to corner, I still think it's absolutely beautiful. So why is the drain board here? Well, it's because my wood stove is here, and in the winter months, this is where I do my dishes. I set a big pot here on the stove, and so the water stays nice and hot if I'm doing a large batch of dishes. Because I don't know about you, but this is not reality here. I am human, and so sometimes I do allow dishes to accumulate, and therefore I have to do them in large batches if I get lazy. It's known to happen, but most of the time I will be using my sinks here. So these two large mixing bowls, they're still mixing bowls that you can purchase off of Amazon. These are my kitchen sinks. These are, I believe, 30 or 36 quart steel mixing bowls. Sorry if there's a bit of an echo there, and sorry for hitting the bowls together. But so these sinks, I just fill them with this cold water pot filler, and I have a little foot operated well pump down here on the floor, and that's how I get cold water. But I love these sinks. I love the fact that I can take the sinks away if I need to. I can use them for other things, such as, mixing vegetables and things like that together. Should I be preparing a large dish of some sort? I can then have the whole countertop here as workspace without having the loss of a kitchen sink. And also, I have this pot here, which I've shown in previous videos. That is a 36 quart deep fryer basket from Cabela's or Bass Pro, and it has a spigot on it, so I can heat my water up on my wood stove, get my hot water directly from there. If I need to temper it any, I just use the cold water pot filler here. This tucks away out of the way as well, and I, like I said, could not be any happier with how this turned out. I don't have any traditional plumbing in my cabin, so there's no water being fed into here. So this water comes from a 55-gallon tank that sits on the other side of this wall and is then fed into that well pump down below and back into this faucet so that I can access it and use it when I need to. Now that the counter is done, you can expect to see more cooking videos on the channel. I know there's some of you who have been anxiously waiting for me to get back to sharing some of my recipes with you. That will definitely be happening now that I have a designated space in the kitchen. It feels so good to have the card table out of the kitchen, the folding table that I've been using for the past few months to cook on. If you're new to my channel, thank you for being here today and along with everybody else, but you're probably wondering, where are all of my appliances? Well, I don't have any. I use my wood cook stove to make most of my meals, or I use a little propane burner, like a little camp stove. As far as other appliances that you might find in kitchens, I definitely don't have a microwave. And when it comes to refrigerators, that's one more thing that's been added to this kitchen since I last showed the kitchen reveal where I originally premiered this countertop. So let me take you over to the icebox and show you that real quick for those of you who are new and maybe haven't seen it, and give you a little update on how that's performing for me. This icebox is over 100 years old, and it is non-electric. It actually functions with ice blocks of ice that I freeze in my 4 freezers, which I have in my pantry. And then I fill this up with about 80 pounds of ice and I switch it out every 2 to 3 days. It keeps everything in my refrigerator, such as cream and cheese, anything like that, perfectly cold and refrigerated, just like your traditional refrigerator would. But the difference is there's no electricity needed to run this. If worst came to worst, and it's the winter months, I could pack it full of ice from a pond, a lake, or even snow if I really had to. But this is my only true appliance in the kitchen. So speaking of cooking and getting back to sharing some recipes with everybody, there is one more thing that will be changing eventually in this kitchen, and that is my wood stove. My current wood stove is over 30 years of age, and I originally planned on replacing it this year and putting in a decent sized wood cook stove from J.A. Roby. However, due to some recent car issues, that has been put on hold. But just because this has been put on hold doesn't mean that other projects have been. So make sure that you are subscribed and you turn on bell notifications so that you can be alerted to when I post new videos, because there will be more construction coming up here in the next few weeks around the cabin. But also, with that being said, just be aware that I do have a guest coming in to stay with me for a month, and therefore I might not be getting videos out as regularly as you are accustomed to. If you're new here, I post every week on Friday. My members get an advanced showing of the videos on Wednesdays. But with that being said, like I said, there may not be videos for a few weeks due to having a guest here. I just really cannot take the time away from my guest to be dedicated to the computer and editing videos. However, like I said, there's lots of construction still coming up, so make sure you stay tuned for that. And make sure you stay tuned for some outtakes as well, because I'm always guaranteed to provide a laugh here and there. Until next time, please stay safe and take care, and I do appreciate you joining me today. Push it back to this.
Would you? I don't need your advice.
Okay. Just don't make it sit. Just don't make it sit away from the stone. Motherly advice. I can't help it. Plus, it's my kitchen. Ha! There's somebody who's a professional woodworker out there who's laughing at me right now. And I accept your embarrassment for me. We could call this episode Mystery Science Alaska, because what I'm about to do is going to mystify all the woodworkers out there. Did you like that little trip with me? At least I didn't get hurt this time. Whether you've contributed through a YouTube membership, Patreon, PayPal, or you've donated to the channel in other ways, your support means a lot to me. So with that being said, that concludes today's video. I want to thank you for watching and joining me today. As always, stay safe and take care until the next time, and I'll see you then.